Hello and welcome. We are so happy that you all are here. If you feel so inclined, you can absolutely put your name and where you're calling from into the chat. Let us know who's in the house. This webinar will be recorded, and we will also be sending a follow-up email after this webinar is complete. Super stoked to see how many folks are in the house. Well, yeah, I should say good morning and good afternoon to some, because it's going to be a national webinar. So we have lots of folks from across the country who are going to be joining us for this really fun topic today. So it is my great pleasure to be hosting the Ditching Disposables, how schools can work with county health departments to implement non-toxic reuse. This webinar will be recorded. The chat is open. We are inviting everyone who feels so inclined to put their name and where they're calling in from. This is going to be across the country that we are doing this Zoom webinar, and we have a lot of folks who are registered, so we are very excited to see so many people excited about this topic. So without further ado, I'm so pleased to introduce Crystal Dreisbeck, the CEO of Upstream Solution, and J. Chris Salter, the Environmental Health Division Director of Durham County Department of Public Health. And my name is Ben Schleifer. I am the Green and Clean Purchasing Coordinator at the Center for Environmental Health, also known as CEH. And today we're going to be talking about reuse in the K through 12 schools and how to work with health departments to get there. So CEH is a nonprofit dedicated to protecting public health from exposures to toxic chemicals. We work with large purchasers to utilize their buying power to incentivize the production of environmentally preferred products and purchasing. And my personal large purchasers are the K through 12 schools. And so you may have gone to a school lunch recently and look at all these common features that are in the school lunch packaging. There's just a lot going on here. The stuff I see in particular is there's a tray, something to hold the food, but there's also paper, there's plastic, there's usually a utensil. Lots of single use in the school lunches. It's lightweight, so it's carried. And sometimes there's weird food like limes. But with all that single use, with all those plastics and the chemicals, and even with some of the paper products, we're seeing they're putting chemicals into these products. So with zero context, which of these lunch trays have PFAS or per and polyfluorinated alkaline substances? If you guessed the top ones, you are correct. And these are over 100 parts per million total fluorine. But what's curious is that each column is made by the same company. So World Centric has a product that has shown to have PFAS in the past, but also a product with no fluorine content. And this is true for Eco Products or China and Huhtamaki. And again, these are not styrofoam, these are molded fiber products. They were deemed compostable at one point in their lives. What is a PFAS? It is a chemical, man-made. The most famous one is Teflon, and it provides a grease and water resistant to certain products. I would say so-called grease and water resistant. Again, these products are intended to be used for about 20 minutes and then go into the waste stream after they're done. But the real problem is that they're endocrine disrupting chemicals. So PFAS have been shown to affect the thyroid, which is a hormonal system. And with hormonal systems, a little bit of disrupting chemical can go a long way. So it messes with fertility, it messes with your immune system, and it can also absolutely has a correlation with cancer. But this is not just a PFAS problem. The school lunch has notoriously had that single-use products, and those single-use products have had has been shown to have lots of negative health impacts. So expanded polystyrene, also known as styrofoam, is very likely a carcinogen. PFAS, again, like I said, mess with the hormonal system, and microplastics are starting to be found in every part of the human body at younger and younger ages. The most alarming study is that there is seemingly about a straw's worth of plastic inside the brain, and that is alarming to me. And so there's been a call. This paper dropped in early January this year, and I'm just going to read some of this stuff. Childhood cancer is up 35%. Male reproductive birth defects have doubled. Neurodevelopmental disorders are affecting 1 in 6 children. Pediatric asthma has tripled, and pediatric obesity prevalence has quadrupled. And this quote is kind of alarming to me. The evidence is so overwhelming that the effects of manufactured chemicals are so disruptive for children that inaction is no longer an option. So why am I talking about this? Is because if we are going to get these toxic chemicals away from some of the most vulnerable people, the young folks, we might as well be pushing for the most upstream and safe solution, in particular, reusables. I call it my shiny solution. And these make the food look better. They're available in safe materials. They prevent climate chaos of a variety of different levels, and they can save money. But the really big thing for me is it teaches good values. We are teaching children to throw away a piece of plastic every single day at the school lunch. We are normalizing single-use plastic at an age as young as 5, and that is a problem to me. We should be teaching our youngers better than that, and we should be also encouraging them for the future, which is going to be a reusable future. So we have green screen certified products, and this is a certification that Center for Environmental Health and Clean Production Action put together, and it just checks to see if any of the durable products have chemicals of concern in them. We check it with a list of over 10,000 different chemicals to make sure there's nothing of alarm. We also have a great nonprofit partner called Plastic Free Restaurants. They're based out of Southern California. They will buy your reusable product for you. If you have an if you have a styrofoam tray, they will buy you a reusable tray if you can show ways that you can actually wash it. And that's what brings us to this subject. We're talking about how to change a school system of lunch that was relying heavily on single-use packaging to a more reusable system, a more sustainable system. And washing is a key component of how to make sure that these reusable systems work. Most intuitive is having a washing on the school site where they wash the dishes after lunch every day. This is the preferred option, but this often can't be done in the school systems that we have. The kitchens are too small. It's too expensive to renovate the kitchen. Plumbing has not been thought about for years. And so sometimes we have to pivot to a centralized model. So let's say you have a high school with a big dish machine. You get 2 sets of dishes and have them pick up the dirties when they drop off the food and the cleans at the school site. So kind of a satellite system. This is great, and it's within the school district, but even that might be a bit of a burden for some of the larger school districts and also for even some of the smaller ones. So we have been exploring third-party wash systems or offsite models where you pay an outside entity to come in, pick up your dirties, and drop off your cleans every day and make sure that they get washed so the school does not have to worry about it. It does cost money, and it is bringing in an outside entity into the bureaucracy of the school system. But we have had some success in California over that. Fremont Unified has 10 of their 29 K through 5 schools washing reusable dishes with a third-party vendor. It is amazing. And the numbers absolutely pile up. 2.3 million single-use foodware items were diverted from the waste stream annually. And that is 23,000 pounds of packaging waste that never had to be made. And what's crazy is 2,000 pounds of these 2 items were displaced. And these things, again, plastic in the mouth is very problematic for me, and they only get used for 20 minutes, stay in the environment for hundreds of years. But there are a lot of misconceptions when moving to reuse. So we want to at least address some of the misconceptions and then some of the barriers. So a lot of folks think it can be too expensive. You have to pay someone to wash, which in this neck of the woods is very expensive for cost of living. You bring in a milk dispenser that can help with display some of the cost and then get your reusable cups. One of the big pushbacks I get is this going to be too messy. Well, when you have an open container, even an open cup, students actually walk slower so they don't spill anything. And so spills are actually less. A lot of folks are like, what if the students stab each other? And you're like, that doesn't really happen. I did a historical deep dive. Over 200 years, there has not been a fork stabbing. There are scissors at school as well. And yeah, loss rates can be high, particularly with utensils, but if you pair it with a tray, it's not as large because they're already primed to return the tray. And these things look like they need to go someplace important because they look valuable. And the last one is like, oh, stainless steel looks like prison. I just put a picture of what the reusable in prison or in incarcerated area tray looks like. It's a durable plastic, and oftentimes incarcerated folks are eating off of single use anyways. So those are just common misconceptions you hear in the field, but there are actual barriers. Like I talked about, those dish machines can be old. They could be out of place. They could also just not be in the school kitchen. And so some workarounds are try to look for an outside vendor who can potentially wash for your school. The labor piece is probably the most complicated one. So nutrition staff often have a job immediately after the school lunch, and so they can't necessarily add more hours to it. And hiring someone new for a job at the school system can be cumbersome and just takes a while. So I always recommend starting small. Think of it as a marathon, not a sprint. I wouldn't recommend starting with just utensils. The loss rate's a little bit too high. But I do say if you need to start small, think about maybe reusables 1 day a week. So it takes some of the burden off of washing. Think about just one of the school meals. Don't necessarily need to focus on breakfast until you can see that you get the lunch system in place. I also don't recommend starting at the beginning of the school year. There's just a little too much going on. And yeah, some folks are resistant to change. They've been doing this way for 30-ish years now. And so it's really important to uplift not only the nutrition staff work, but the custodial staff work, because they are working tirelessly to make a clean campus and serve food to children. And I think that's really important and a very valuable service. So let them know you appreciate it. Tell the students to tell them that they are appreciated. And so, yeah, improving school lunch has a lot of different moving parts. And my hope is to figure out if working with the county health department is a barrier that is a misconception, or is it an actual barrier? And either way, how can we make it a little bit less to allow folks to move towards a reuse system? And with that, I'm going to toss it to my dear friend, colleague, and mentor, Crystal. Crystal, if you can pop back on screen. Lovely. You ready, Crystal?
I'm ready.
Absolutely. Here we go.
Thank you. Hi. I'm glad to be here. I really want to talk to you about some of my experience collaborating with the county health department, what a success story that was, and the lessons that I learned, and also hopefully help pass along some different ways in which we can frame the lunch tray initiatives in schools that could be helpful to some. I'll start by saying that my longtime colleague, Chris Salter, who is on the call and who will speak last, I just want to point out how much of an important person that he has been in creating the success of, gosh, everything that I did in my former organization, Don't Waste Durham, in Durham, North Carolina, where I live. Um, it was truly the collaboration of the health department that launched us to success. So I'm really glad to be able to tell this story. Uh, just stay on this slide for a bit, Ben. So a, a couple of some of the key milestones I want to talk to you about in this success story. So it was back in 2010, actually 15 years ago. I was eating my lunch off of a styrofoam plate, and it made me, it really, that started it all for me in terms of where I am now. I envisioned and created an initial design for a reuse system that included a wash facility and logistics and all the equipment around the city that you would need to make this a reality. And I submitted that concept to a magazine contest and I won runner up. And that made me think, well, someone somewhere doesn't think my idea is too crazy. So I started working on policy. 2012, I founded Don't Waste Durham, the nonprofit. And once we got a critical mass of people ready to work on the reuse system creation from my initial vision, the first thing I did, which was completely actually by accident, was just to, I just thought, why not? I'm going to invite the health department to one of our community meetings and just talk to them and just have a dialogue with all the community there about what this would be like to do this. Originally, it was in restaurants. And Chris and another one of his colleagues came, which I just couldn't. I was beside myself. I was so happy that they came and they were willing to hear about our idea for a reuse system that included a wash facility. At first, I said, what would be the red flags for you about washing reusables? And they immediately, right off the bat, said, that would be very much against food code. That is absolutely unsanitary. We cannot have reusable containers circulating around the city. And I said, oh, no, no, here's what we're actually envisioning, that the all of the dishes would come back to a central facility to be washed and sanitized and redistributed from there. And Chris and his colleague had not thought of that before. And they said, oh, well, if that was the case, we never thought of that. Well, then you'd really need to do this and think about that. And they started listing the things that would need to be developed in order for this to actually work. And I'm so grateful for that, that it was an immediate no, but once they learned what we were really talking about, they were they were innovating in their mind, thinking of how could we do something that did not exist yet. And they kept coming to our meetings. And by 2017, the um, when the reuse system launched, they had by then assisted in the design sprints on how it was going to work. They helped us write the wash protocols. They helped us learn how to use a shared use kitchen, and they permitted and inspected us every year after that, just like any commercial kitchen. And it really became a very, very important relationship. And, a lot of restaurants, for example, are terrified of the health department. They're going to get inspected. They're going to get in trouble. They might get shut down. That's their fears. But in our case, uh, this sort of uh, idea to just initial informal idea to invite them to our meetings was one of the best things I ever did. So I will say then in around 2018, we started shifting to servicing schools. And of course, we gave the health department a heads up. Like, are there any other additional considerations we need to make shifting to this new sector, away from just restaurants and grocery stores and events and festivals, but to schools? And they explained that schools are considered, a more elevated risk um, demographic, and that we would that they would, need to, um, we'd need to make some accommodations for that, we'd be more strictly reviewed and inspected. And at that time, we were also working to design a bigger wash facility of our own. and the health department assisted in, they call it the plan review. Chris will talk about that more later on, but basically helping us design it in advance so that it would meet food code. And lastly, um, around 2019, Chris invited me to present to the Board of Health. So, he reports to the Board of Health. He had me come and speak to them um, about the reuse system program. And I felt that he was proud of our partnership and our collaboration, which is why he had me come and present. And people were really thrilled. They never conceived of something like this before. And by the end of the year, Chris had actually gone to bat for us at the state level and they ended up removing the need for a reuse system to fill out an exemption. So basically, our partnership also led to shifting the state food code to be more conducive to reuse systems. So I wanted to talk about that success story first. And I think the lesson learned is whenever I talk to anyone thinking about doing reuse systems, is really don't be afraid. In fact, be very strategic. Get the health department in early on as a very invested stakeholder, because if if you bring them along in the whole journey, they will feel a trust and for what you're doing, and also just um, to be a great partner in helping you do things right and avoid risk in the future. So, okay, I want to show you a few slides next. Could you forward? Yes. So this is a case study, and actually, don't worry about taking notes too much. I'm actually going to share um, my slides with you after this. I'll put it in the chat so you can have it. But basically, I just want to point out this case study. This was a charter school, so not a usual public school, but a K through 8 charter school approached Don't Waste Durham and said, could you please help us eliminate our disposable serveware? And our kitchen's really small, and we don't have a commercial dishwasher. We only have a 3-compartment sink. And could you provide daily wash service? And we were like, absolutely. It's really not rocket science. It's pick up, wash, and deliver. So the lunchroom staff actually got to pick out which model of tray that they wanted, and picked out one, and they were so thrilled to be able to pick one out. And even though it's not a huge school, so 140,000 disposable items eliminated in one school year, that was also sporks. So we absolutely love that. It was a tray and spork combo. They um the trays and sporks were something that they had to pay for. So they fronted the cost for that, and it paid off in less than one school year. One of the things that we were surprised to learn was that they were able to take the time that the custodians would normally spend taking out so much trash and reallocate that custodial time to other programs. And they said they had fewer incidences of custodial back injury. So it was just like sort of a surprise side effect. So next, we kind of started going for private schools because they were easier to go after at first. They're a little bit more agile in what they can spend their money on. So they were able to do this contract with Don't Waste Durham, an annual contract, and they paid us monthly, which was really great because, as you know, that helps keep reuse service providers surviving and growing, is to get monthly recurring revenue. But one of the great things is that Durham Public Schools, which has 56 schools in the county, got FOMO, right? They were like, why are you doing it for them? Why not for us? So next slide. Go ahead, Ben. Yep. So I then put together a slide deck for the Durham School Board, for the School Board of Durham Public Schools. And I want to show you a few of those slides because I want to show you how I framed it. So go ahead, next. Right. So obviously announcing the opportunity. Next slide. And then I talked to them about the issues, what they're obviously important, what they're spending money on. I think that's quite significant, $417,000 a year. And they create 40,000 plus trash items daily. Now, it's important to note that Durham Schools still uses styrofoam. So some of the schools had switched to compostable, but a lot of them are still using the styrofoam. So we know, thanks to CEH and all of its materials, that obviously they were also being exposed to chemicals. So next slide. So then we presented the solution. Next slide. And this would be, of course, some of the waste reduction opportunities. Next slide. And the health and safety, of course. And I will be sharing these slides with you in case any of it is helpful. Next. So I want to point out these things, which I know we all feel and know, but these are important things to express to some decision makers, that reusable lunch trays is really science, right? There are benefits, and therefore they align with STEM principles and evidence-based practice. It obviously normalizes sustainable behaviors. At Upstream, one of our absolute, as you know, one of our mission is reuse, and one of the main pillars of our work is to normalize reuse. I can't think of a better way out of anything anywhere to normalize the concept of reuse in our society than starting with K through 12 public schools. The other thing, the next bullet is something that a few teachers actually came to us and said, thank you so much for trying to switch Durham Public Schools to reusable, because what we believe is that they notice that these kids have true climate anxiety. They 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 are the ones who are going to have to live with the downstream effects. They are actually extremely climate anxious. And the teachers said, they used the word moral harm. They said they're teaching to care for the earth in the classroom. And then meanwhile, they go to lunch and they eat off of styrofoam and throw it away. So they said they felt that that practice was actually damaging the children's development of their sense of integrity and their trust in adults and trust in systems. And then, of course, it can increase the staff pride. So I just want to also note that those are education and social benefits. And then, of course, we want to let them know about the economic benefits, which they really obviously care about very much. Next. And then this is another one. I'm sure many of you are doing this, but I think if you're not, please point out that this is a just transition solution as well. I don't know where y'all's trash goes, but in Durham, it gets trucked on a 200-mile journey every day to the Sampson County landfill where people of color live. It's almost entirely, it's a poor county. It's people of color. And it's just it's an atrocity, and there are terrible health impacts happening where Durham's trash goes. So if you can sort of blend that into how you frame this as well. Okay, next slide. So I really wanted to point out to the school board who is going to benefit. So it's not just the school students, right? It's also underserved communities in the city. It's the residents in the 14 watersheds of Durham, and it's the populations in and around the landfill. Okay, next. So, of course, we used CEH materials, and I pointed out to the school board that Durham Public Schools could join a nationwide movement to give them kind of FOMO, like get them on board. Okay, next. And then we proposed this 10 school pilot program, and we put all the schools into ArcGIS and grouped them into clusters for best fleet management and, you know, for our service. Okay, next. And then there was a startup costs and an annual contract that we were proposing. Next. And I think everybody cares about building community wealth. Obviously, these are jobs that cannot be exported to other places. These are real jobs. And while Durham Public School lunchroom staff are only paid $10 an hour. It's really abysmal. Don't Waste Durham was paying a living wage and employing people in our certified neuro-inclusive wash facility. Next. And I was able to show them that by the end of 2025, we would have created 30 plus new jobs because of the contract with Durham Public Schools. Next. And then finally, I also linked everything about going reusable to the strategic plan of the school system. Next. As well as the city's strategic plan. And next, as well as the county's strategic plan. So you can sort of couch this initiative in what are the bigger goals for the place in which you live. Okay, next. I'm almost done. You can skip through the references section. And then we did this cost analysis. And while these numbers are probably not going to pertain to you, they're different everywhere. But I want to let you know that, with these different scenarios, so doing it in 10 schools, 20 schools, 36 schools, 56 schools, there are startup costs. And for Durham Public Schools in yellow, there's startup costs for them to get enough dishwashers in the schools that didn't have dishwashers and to upfit all and repair the ones that did, but they weren't very good. There were higher startup costs than it would be for an established central kitchen, like established central wash facility like Don't Waste Durham, to do it as a third party. You can imagine that having 56 dishwashers going at the same time is a different beast. Okay, next. We did the same with the annual operating costs. And then the last slide is just going, no, ignore these numbers. I probably should have blocked out these numbers. But the way we calculated this is a big spreadsheet with a bunch of tabs that all talk to each other. And it goes down to literally the dish detergent and the cost of utilities per square foot and the number of staff and what they're paid. So this spreadsheet, although it is based on Durham and it's a couple years old, if that is something that you all need and want to play with and adapt, I would be absolutely willing to share that as well. I think that concludes my slides. Yeah. Thank you.
Amazing, Crystal, great job. If you're feeling what Crystal was saying, put some love in the chat, use that reaction, put some pluses in the chat because she is slaying it. I just want to take the moment to introduce Chris of Durham County Public Health. And again, really important partner for getting Durham over the finish line. And I'm hoping he can drop some amazing knowledge on us and maybe something we can use in our own counties to get more reuse in the K-12 schools. Chris, you feeling ready?
Yeah, thanks for the intro, Ben. I'm Chris Salter, Environmental Health Director for Durham County, North Carolina. And Crystal pretty much did a great job of explaining what we did with her and what we do. As a regulatory agency, we're kind of unique in the public health department in that not everything that we do is popular and it's not perceived as like being helpful, but our goal is to help everyone and achieve better public health. Next slide, please. Okay, food service inspections and regulation in North Carolina we have general statutes here that dictate what local governments will do to some degree, excuse me. And then General Statute 130A in North Carolina says basically if you prepare food and sell that food, you will have a permit from the local health department and you will be regulated. And we regulate per administrative code set. So 15A NCAC 18A.2600, which we refer to as the 2600 rules, are the regulatory guidelines that we use. But within those guidelines, we adopted the North Carolina Food Code Manual back in 2012, which is about 95 to 98% identical to the FDA Food Code. So that's what we use to regulate food service. And food service includes restaurants, food stands, school cafeterias, nursing homes, child care centers, mobile food units. All of those food service operations are regulated under the very same rules. Next slide, please. In North Carolina, I put this slide in just to demonstrate something that's kind of unique. It may not be the only state that does this, but very few states do this. We have a grading system that includes alphabetical grades, but also numerical scores. And this gets displayed by law. It has to be displayed in every food service establishment that we regulate. That is an important thing in this state, because when a consumer walks into a food service establishment, they look for this, and they look up there and they go, that this establishment has a score, a grade A, but their score is only 92. I'm not eating here. And they turn around and walk out. So in a food service establishment, revenue and confidence in that establishment is dictated very, very much so by this score. Like I said, the consumer here knows there's a big difference between a 99.5 and a 90.5, and there is. And so when a parent walks in a lunchroom, or some staff member walks in a lunchroom in a school building, or the principal walks in and they see that they've got a 91, they know there's something that needs to be addressed. Next slide, please. One big aspect of what we do, anytime there's a new food establishment that applies to open, they have to complete an application with us. And the first step is plan review. So you submit a plan, and you show the layout of your restaurant, the equipment that's going to be in there, the menu, the amount of food you're going to serve, the refrigeration that you have in place, and all these different types of things are reviewed by us. And something called flow of food is very important to the safe operation of a food service establishment. So we work with an operator to determine how food should actually come in the back to a loading dock, and as it moves into storage and into the prep areas, into the cooking, and then the serve line areas, and do it as safely as possible. That also includes types of equipment based on what you're doing. Next slide, please. When we're doing this plan review process, we do have tools that we use. People don't give thought to things like, if you're going to have this many prep sinks and this many hand sinks and a dish machine that sanitizes with hot water, you need X amount of hot water. So your hot water heater has to be sized. If you go out and purchase the wrong hot water heater and we can't approve it, you've just lost a bunch of money that we could have saved you had you allowed us to work with you and help you size that. Dry storage calculations, refrigeration calculations, those are a big part of what we do for you as you're developing operations. And anytime you change an operation, like if you're trying to add a washing center in your establishment, all these different things have to be taken into consideration. Wares that are washed in a food service facility can't be stacked wet. They have to be air dried. It takes a tremendous amount of space in some situations, and you've got to have the right kind of racks and space, and you can't just put the stuff anywhere, right? You can't have it by the back door where dust might be coming in somewhere, because you contaminate the food contact surfaces if it's not stored properly and in the right place. So we help you figure those things out as you go along. Next slide, please. So when we work with the public schools, and this is true with any food service establishment, I tell my staff all the time, the last thing that you want to do is walk through that door and have a manager or operator look up and go, "Oh my goodness, you're here again today." It's the last thing I wanted to see was your face again today. We want them to see us and say, "Hey, they're here for a reason. They are regulators, but they're also our partners in trying to make us better." If you refer back to the slide that we had about the scores and the grades, those dictate the revenue in a lot of cases for an establishment. And it also, like I said, in the in the sense of a school cafeteria, the confidence in that operation is dictated by that score and that grade. So we work very closely. We have a great relationship with DPS, Durham Public School System. We speak with them on a regular basis. The dietary manager knows me well. He calls me from time to time, shoots me emails once in a while. Sometimes we just check in. Oftentimes there are questions about what's going on. They have to receive certain number of inspections every year for each one of their cafeterias to meet the requirements of Department of Instruction, which regulates grant funding that comes down as pass-through funding from the feds down to the state, and then it gets passed down to the counties. And don't ask me exactly what's going on with that right now, but I believe a lot of that funding's in jeopardy right now, which is sad, but that's not what we're here for. But throughout the year, we start out each year, we have a Q&A session with all the managers from all of the cafeterias in the school system. And we have a meeting, and we have some of our staff go there and just answer questions. And we talk about some of the problems that maybe we saw last year, and maybe some of the success stories. Like we had this issue over here at Riverside High, and we were able to correct it by doing this and this. It might be something you could think about doing in all the locations. We do updates throughout the year. We talk with the manager. You know, if we see a serious problem, and you know, he addresses it along with us. We provide in services, and anytime they're getting ready to replace equipment, make any changes to menu or anything like that, the first thing they do is reach out to us, and then we walk through it with them. And we do things like say, hey, you know, this is a great idea, but you're going to have to replace this piece of equipment. You're going to have to add this piece of equipment. Your refrigeration might not be adequate. So, and you've got options. Either you can add some refrigeration, or maybe you can just get an extra delivery each week. Those types of things is what we do. It's been great working with the DPS system on our end. And I think we have a great partnership. That's pretty much what I have. Ben wants to take.
Amazing. Well, let's give Chris some love in the chat too. Chris, that was very comprehensive, and I just want to uplift what you were saying. Both Chris and Crystal, come and pop on screen because we're about to do a little bit of Q&A. But yeah, that partnership piece I think is super important that Chris was highlighting, and everyone has the same shared goal. We want to serve healthy meals to young people, and like we have different approaches of getting there, but working in collaboration is going to be way more beneficial for the youth than trying to have a little bit more like, oh no, the regulators are here kind of situation. And so I got a couple questions from my end. I want to kind of point towards Chris because they've come up in the work, but please put your questions into the Q&A. We might not be able to get to them all, but we can get to them after the webinar. And so my questions are, I had a county health department that was unresponsive to the schools when they reached out. And so they wanted to start talking about changing the system, and they multiple months did not hear back from their health inspector. And I was wondering, Chris, if you have any hints or thoughts about how to maybe grease those wheels a little bit, because a lot of folks want to move quickly on this stuff.
Well, there's always a political side to things. In Durham, if you reach out to a county commissioner, it's going to end up going to the county manager, which will go to the department head, and which will come down to me. It will make it down to me if a county commissioner deems it as important. We have direct phone lines. I take calls from people in the community almost daily. So you know, you could reach out to me directly, and we can start things that way too.
Excellent. Yeah. And I just wanted to establish that it's important to start these conversations. And if you don't hear back, maybe, try some other avenues of approach. And so, yeah, we definitely touched on this, but I think it'll be good to reiterate. So, from your point of view, Chris, what would, moving to reusables in the K through 12 school meal like mean? What are some of your concerns that might come up? What are some of your, potential solutions that you could provide to schools if they're like, hey, I want to try this in my school district?
Well, I think we've already covered a lot of this, and Crystal did as well, and you did as well. It's like the materials that you're going to use, like they have to be durable. That was one of the things that we worked with Crystal on when she was trying to get her Green to Go program up and running. They had some containers that were very concerning in the beginning that would not have withstood the rigors of being transported and washed over and over again. So we encourage them to get something more sturdy. The materials, obviously, I would recommend like stainless steel for trays and things like that. Um, like we were talking about earlier, what type of machine are you going to be using? How is it going to sanitize? Is it going to chemical sanitize? Is it going to hot water sanitize? Do you have adequate hot water? Things like that.
Excellent. Sweet. And again, you have to start that conversation to figure out what those are about. And so here's the kind of interesting one. So we have some of those third-party washers that are serving, they have a dish machine in a different county than the county that they're washing it. And so they're not technically under the jurisdiction of the county department. And so Chris, and you may say, I don't know, but I'm curious to see how you all might consider navigating that space if that's coming up.
Yeah, if this did come up, it should not really be a big issue because in North Carolina, we every county has to use the North Carolina Administrative Code and North Carolina Food Code Manual to regulate operations, right? So there should be very little deviation from what goes on in one county in regards to another. So if you're permitted, if you got a permit in another county, you should be able to do or you should be doing exactly what I would expect in Durham County. The biggest concern with this for me would be the transport. You're going to be regulated in the other county and you're going to get inspections and everything should be set up properly. But what are you doing in transport? And you want to make sure that you've got the right kind of storage, transport containers and transport vehicles, and you're not exposing things to some sort of contamination when you are in transport.
Amazing, amazing. Okay, I want to open it up to some Q&A from the audience. We already have 8 questions in the chat. Or in the Q&A, if you put questions in the chat, we're not going to get to them. If you put questions in the Q&A, we will try. And so I'm just going to do a quick read. This one's from Autumn. We've heard about challenges with existing contracts for packaging, particularly the practice of structuring packaging contracts a year in advance. Have you encountered similar difficulties? If so, do you have any recommendations for navigating for them? I can attempt this one. Yes, the schools go to bid about a year in advance. April was my bid season in California. My recommendation is you can put in the school purchasing bids preferences for things. So preferences for less packaging, preferences for reusable materials, and preferences for items that are deemed safe. Green screen certified would be a lovely preference to see in the school meals when it comes to packaging. So that's my perspective. Crystal, you hopped off mute. Do you have any thoughts on that?
I think if I understood the question right, is that if there's a bunch of disposables procured and they've already spent the money on it, then what do you do? I Well, I think you could answer that the best, Ben, but I also um want to point out, I'm sure everyone here knows, but just in case that what is it called? Plastic-free restaurants can also jump in and save the day by taking the receipts of what you've purchased in disposables and just giving you the money to buy reusable trays. So even if the disposables have already been procured, I believe that could save the day in this case.
Absolutely. So Diane Build has anyone thought of mobile dishwashing units to avoid some of that transportation? I like it, but I also like a kind of a brick and mortar dish machine that has plumbing too. To me, that's intuitively makes a little bit more sense, but I see Chris hopped off mute. Do you have any thoughts on the mobile dishwashing, folks?
Yeah, that would be, you would still have to be hard connected somewhere because you'd generate a tremendous amount of gray water when you wash, and that's going to require you to also have a grease interceptor before it goes into the sewer. So you still need to have some place where you would hard connect to get water and to discharge the gray water. And I'm not familiar with an operation like that anywhere.
So there are a couple of places in the US where reuse innovators have designed and used mobile wash units. And of course, Upstream heard about those. So when we're designing the Grand Canyon National Park reuse system, all of the stakeholders decided that the best thing to do would be to have a mobile unit. So there are lots of factors in that decision. One of them is, if you start digging to actually build a building on a national park, you're dealing with years and years and years of compliance nightmares. But just the fact that it's on wheels changes the game. So we just put out an RFP for a mobile dish unit, and I shared it in the chat, and I shared it in the Q&A as well, so you could take a look at that. But basically, there is three-phase power input. There will be plenty of water input, and then there will also be, depending on the needs of the health department that oversees the national park, an above ground or below ground grease trap, so that the grease is intercepted on its way to the sewage.
Yep. And if you're washing in-house too, it is important to get the public utilities on board too, just to give them a heads up that we're moving from a system that might have more grease coming down the drain. That way they know they can be prepared for that. And they'll love to hear from you because they almost never hear from folks who are starting to wash some. So it's just another stakeholder you might not have heard about. So Megan said, can speakers please speak to the labor needs to wash and manage reusable food servicewares as compared to single use, and whether it actually takes more labor hours to wash, etc., than to constantly be restocking inventory and single use foodware? I'm going to jump on that a little bit. Absolutely correct, Megan. You'll see some of the cafeteria workers made this giant lattice work of single-use trays that are stuck together. And so they unstick them before the real rush of the meal. And that takes time and effort. There's efforts around the waste. There's efforts around the packaging and putting food into the packaging and sealing it up. There are labor hours associated with single use that are hard to capture, honestly. And theoretically, yeah, washing will be an increase in hours, but it also just might be a change from what they're doing from one thing. So if you're doing a lot more scratch cooking and just scooping onto the tray, you don't have to worry about putting the little salads into individual wrappings as well, or doling out little bits of condiments. And so, yeah, I mean, like the labor piece is just a little complicated because a lot of these nutrition staff are union workers. Maybe they're not written in to do any dishwashing. And so this is why I find uplifting the work and being like, hey, what did you think about this? Can we try it this way? Do you think that way will work better? Let's try it that way. Is a really good way to kind of get them to start rethinking the system that they've been doing maybe for 10, 20 years and trying something new. I tend to be a little bit more conservative on my labor estimates because of my whole goal is to make sure that this isn't costing the school in the long run. And so maybe that's not doing the reuse movement a service, but I also am trying to make sure that the schools don't see any hiccups that they might potentially stop the project for. And so that's kind of my approach. And I thank you for uplifting that, Megan. Crystal, you got thoughts on that?
Yeah, just a few thoughts. I mean, and this is in that spreadsheet thing I was talking about that I can happily share, but basically, if you think about it, In my experience, 16 lunch trays fit in a rack, and washing one rack is a 90-second cycle. So if you are spraying and putting them in the rack, running them through the rack, taking them off the rack and putting them on a drying rack, and then taking them off the drying rack and putting them in a stack for the people to serve the food again, um, what it is labor. It is indeed additional labor, but it is not as much as people think. And so I'll put here in the chat again this conscious cafeteria report that analyzes about 15 schools that did this, and come to find out it takes about 1 additional hour per day for a staff person to do what I just described for one school. The other thing is, oh, so for the Grand Canyon National Park project, that staff time was like the number one concern of the food service people who are going to be taking this on. And you'd think that with all of the food service locations in the Grand Canyon National Park, we were able to calculate it down, and it is they will only need to hire one full-time equivalent to wash the dishes. So for the entire Grand Canyon National Park. So I think that often comes up as a fear, but the truth of the matter is it's really not that much more labor.
Mhm. And my mantra is every school is different. Different space might involve different amounts of labor too. And so it is important to plug in with the on-the-ground staff to hear their concerns before we start implementing, to make sure we can figure out if there are little quick barriers or design elements we can remove. So Laura asked, I'm trying to convince my school district to purchase metal trays for the high school. Lovely. And they will buy stainless steel forks and spoons. They are concerned about noise and replacement cost for the metal trays. Couple things here. High schools are a little bit more challenging initially than the K through 5s. And that's because there's more students, there's more meals, and often the students are eating all over the place. So keep your eyes on the return rate. Noise-wise, I don't think you're going to be running into too much of a problem. The students have been very respectful with these guys at the schools I've been, and we're talking the younger ones. And again, like if you make a lot of noise, even with single-use products, there's usually somebody, some adult who would be like, please don't do that, or a little bit more firmly will say that. And so I would kind of put this into the kind of misconception category. But one thing to show that the school administrators, that the students can handle it, is bring the students into that conversation and let them explain how well they will handle it. And then have the students, maybe a green team, kind of show off, have the peer-to-peer learning where the students can be like, hey, this is new and it's important for the environment. Please don't make the loud sounds, because then the adults are going to get all mad at us. And so like uplifting the student voice would be a good opportunity for this scenario, Laura. Anyone else want to chime in on that one? I will move right along. How different are regulations for dishwashing vendors as opposed to school washing dishes themselves? Chris?
None. Yeah, we're going to expect any mobile or offsite operation to adhere to the exact same rules and regulations that the cafeteria, if they had it on site, was responsible for. So basically, the quick answer is none.
Thank you, Chris. So Brian said, how can local governments support the development of central offsite dishwashing locations or services? That's a lovely question. Thanks, Brian. Crystal, you want to hop on that one?
In my experience, in my limited experience, Ben, you'll know this better than I, but I know that the schools would really like to upfit and repair and procure dishwashing machines. And that seems to be just absolutely a barrier. It's a high cost, but of course, once you do procure those, there's amortized savings, right? The savings come over time. There is maintenance, obviously, but that procurement of the dishwashing machine pays off, and schools need help with that.
Yeah. California had the CDE, California Department of Education, actually allocate 15 million just to put in dish machines in K through 12 schools, which is wonderful. I would love nothing more for states to adopt that. Each school site had the maximum of about $40,000. That it should be enough for maybe half the schools, depending on plumbing, to at least get a door type dish machine, which can do a good amount of racks per hour, and kind of help with the installation. And so like initiatives like that can really help press. Local governments love working with the schools and having these one-off costs where they can show off really cool pictures of the students loving their trays and saving the environment. And so if there are mini grants out there, a dish machine for a local school is absolutely something that is worth pursuing. We're trying to do that a little bit more out here in the Bay Area in California. And yeah, we'll let you know how it goes. All right, it is 11. I want to acknowledge everyone's time and thank you. If you put some love in the chat and do some reactions, that would be amazing. This will be recorded and we will send it up in a follow-up email. If your questions did not get answered in the Q&A, we will also follow up with you all directly. So thank you all so much. Crystal, do you have some last thoughts?
I just wanted to say I put a couple resources in the chat in case it's of interest.
And our follow-up email, we're hoping to get all those resources out there. Chris, what do you got?
I'm good. Thank you for having me. I enjoy being here. This is a great cause. I'm glad I could be a part of it.
Thanks so much, Chris. We're glad to have you here too.
Okay, I got to jump off. I'll
Yep.
talk to you all later. Bye-bye.
Bye.